You don't become good by trying to be good, but by finding the goodness that is already within you and allowing that goodness to emerge. But it can only emerge if something fundamental changes in your state of consciousness.
So what that means, if nothing changes in your state of consciousness, the ego has many ideas. It says, I want to be a spiritual person. I want to be recognized as a spiritual person. I want to be more spiritual than all these people. And I'm definitely more spiritual than you. So the ego has all kinds of ideas of what it wants to be. It might even say, yes, I want to be good, because it wants to have a better image of itself. But on that level, by the essential dysfunction of the ego is still operating. So this is why we have the phrase, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Because no matter how good your intentions are, when you're still trapped in the ego, it will always take you into conflict eventually. So you have to go deeper beyond the realm of opposites where there's good and bad and reach a place within yourself that is unconditioned, that is what I sometimes call the formless. Expressed beautifully in the Old Testament, in the little saying, be still and know that I am God. And that's in the Old Testament. It contains the entire wisdom of religion in those few words. Be still, meaning go to that place where the mind is no longer operating, where you're just conscious without thinking. And that is the level where the eternal resides.
When you went first to school, you went to kindergarten. And in kindergarten, the idea was to push along so that you could get into first grade. And then push along so that you could get into second grade, third grade, so on, going up and up. And then you went to high school, and this was a great transition in life. And now the pressure is being put on. You must get ahead. You must go up the grades and finally be good enough to get to college. And then when you get to college, you're still going step by step, up to the great moment in which you're ready to go out into the world. And then when you get out into this famous world, comes the struggle for success in profession or business. And again, there seems to be a ladder before you, something for which you're reaching all the time. And then, suddenly, when you're about 40 or 45 years old in the middle of life, you wake up one day and say, huh? I've arrived. And by Jove, I feel pretty much the same as I've always felt. In fact, I'm not so sure that I don't feel a little bit cheated. Because you see, you were fooled. You were always living for somewhere where you aren't.
We spend a big hunk of our lives believing that the way that we become, quote, successful, happy, fulfilled, self-actualized, whatever it might be, is on the basis of what I accomplish, what my resume looks like, how many promotions I get. And so we send our children off to school and we ask them to learn to identify themselves on how much they get and what they accomplish. Your grades become more important than what it is that you are studying. What you own, what clothes you wear, what labels you have, and so on. We become obsessed with this kind of absurdity. And this is the false self at work.
You know, look back 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 15 years ago, and think of a decision you made. that if you would have made a different decision, you'd have a totally different life today. Better or worse, I don't know, but totally different. The most important decision you can make above any on the face of the earth is deciding that no matter what happens in your life, no matter what happens, you're going to live in a beautiful state.
So if life is not happening the way you think it should happen, you're unhappy. If life happens the way you think it should happen, you are happy. It's as simple as that. So if life has to happen the way you think it should happen, first of all, how you think, with how much focus you think, how much stability is there in your thought, and how much reverberance is there in the thought process will determine whether your thought will become a reality or is it just an empty thought. Or how you do not create any impediments for your thought by creating negative thought process. Is possible, is something possible or not possible? Is destroying it. What is possible and not possible is not your business, it's nature's business. Your business is just to strive for what you want.
The decision to say, I am not going to suffer, that if suffering arises, pain's one thing, suffering's another. Suffering is when you're like, suffering could be worry, it could be anger, it could be frustration. It's anything that takes you out of a beautiful state. And here's what people don't get. You can end suffering by stop focusing on yourself and focus on something you want to serve greater than yourself. Your children, your wife, your mission, your life. You can get out of it in an instant because the nature of the human mind is to constantly compare things. Your mind, your brain is a 2 million year old device, and it is not designed to make you happy. It's designed to make you survive. And that's why it's always looking for what's wrong.
Life is supposed to be good, not just for some, but for all of you. And when it isn't, something has gone terribly wrong. And every single time, the thing that has gone terribly wrong is that an orientation or a perspective has been developed and practiced to the point that other evidence can't come in. In other words, when you have decided something in a very powerful way, then it must be, because law of attraction will always present to you exactly the package that you are practicing all day, every day.
Got no argument with that.
And so we do not sense that your life reflects this now in this powerful way. At one time, yes. But we want to say to you that you are taking more upon yourself. This is really what we would like to say to you.
Soul is also the center of the world, which is a frightening proposition and not one that's easily comprehensible. Solzhenitsyn's work in the Gulag Archipelago is particularly enlightening in this regard, because he insisted that it was a preconception of our Judeo-Christian heritage that each person was the center of the cosmos. And you can think of that as a center of consciousness, right? A center from which being itself is not only reflected, but also generated. And it was Solzhenitsyn's belief, and Dostoevsky's as well, and I think Jung would have been in accordance with this, and Nietzsche as well, for that matter, that in some manner that we don't fathom, because we don't understand the structure of the world very well, the outcome of the world is dependent on our choices, and equally on all of our choices. I don't understand. I know that to be true, or feel that to be true. It's part of the doctrine that each person is of intrinsic and equal worth. Part of that doctrine is that each person has intrinsic and equal responsibility, and that we're each capable of generating a fair bit of hell around us and for other people, but also capable of generating a tremendous amount of good. And that the fate of the world as it careens through eternity is actually a consequence of the ethical decisions of each of us. It's a terrifying idea. It's no wonder people flee from it into hedonism, let's say, and ideology, because it's very frightening possibility that the choices that you make day to day or fail to make have this profound and lasting effect on the structure of reality, but I don't really see any way out of that conclusion.
Come up with 10 laws you are going to spend or you're going to live the remainder of your life under. That could be one of the things I teach in my work, don't die. One of the secrets to legendary is longevity. So outlive your industry peers. Amazing what happens when you get into such great physical health that you just outlive everyone around you. You know, it's 90, you're 90, no, you have no competition. Imagine how easy it will be for you to dominate your field. Imagine how good you're going to be if you're 103, still rocking your game. So the point is, don't die. Protect your health. Hack aging. Eat the right supplements. Work out every day. Run my 2 massage protocol. Make sure you get fresh air. The point is simply this. One of your 10 life laws could simply be don't die. One of your 10 life laws could be give more than you take. One of your 10 life laws could be spend an hour alone building your self-relationship. I was reading Marcus Aurelius very early this morning, the great Roman emperor, and he talked about the shortness of life, but he also talked about this. Find some time every day to be amid tranquility so you could think. See, when you're in the noise, you can't think. The noise of distraction and attraction and diversion by technology. When you're alone, and I've found it's the best thing, first thing in the morning, you can actually think about your values, and you can actually get to know yourself again, and you can actually breathe, and you can actually contemplate, what am I going to do today? How am I going to live? How can I make today on earth a valuable day?
You have to want something so big that it wakes you up in the middle of the night. You have to want something so big that you think about it all the time. No matter what happens to you, it ain't over. It ain't over. Ain't no such a thing as over. As long as God wakes you up, that means he ain't through with you yet. You got a shot to correct it and get it right.
Even when you lose, it's okay to lose, but you can't never get comfortable with it.
If you complain about not having work-life balance, spend more time on vacationing with your family. It's super simple. Let your actions dictate instead of sitting there and feeling like you're not in control.
And why? Because as Malcolm X said, the future belongs to those who prepare for it today. So if you don't put the work in today, if you don't do the unending, back-breaking work of developing yourself into something greater, the world is going to pass you by.
The truth is that you are going to suffer. But the way to deal with suffering is accepting that suffering and then recognizing that it is suffering, accepting it, and then letting it sort of have its say, and then moving on.
As long as I enjoy what I'm doing, I train hard, I have no regrets, and all I can do is give my best, then it's going to be fine, regardless of the outcome. It's important for me to actually hear criticism sometimes, you know, because I think that's what makes me a better player.
And if you end up going to work on a job every day that you hate going to, that ain't living, man. You just existed. At one point in time, you ought to see what living is like. But the only way to see what living like, you gotta jump.
There are moments when you're going to doubt yourself and say, God, why is this happening to me? I'm just trying to take care of my children and my mother. I'm not trying to steal or rob from anybody. Why did this have to happen to me? For those of you that have experienced some hardships, don't give up on your dream.
This walk is hard, but the hardest walks lead to the greatest destinations. The toughest climbs always lead to the best views. It will be worth it in the end.
As Ernest Hemingway noted, the world breaks everyone, and afterward, many are stronger in the broken places.
You have to be grateful for what you can get. Plain and simple. Like, be grateful for what you have, because that's, like, we're lucky to even be here. You know, you have to start in that mindset. It's like, you can't. That's the problem with social media right now, is that you're comparing yourself to people that have like this large success, and you're like, I want to play there. But you first have to go with what you have in front of you and make that meaningful.
I don't care how hard you fail. I don't care how many times you fail the test. I don't care if nobody don't believe in you. It only takes you believing in yourself to get this thing done. As long as you believe in you, you got the right mindset, you got the right attitude, you can have whatever you like. But if you fall, I need you to fall forward. I need you to fail forward.
Every one of us who's a goal achiever sets goals, but very few people think about the obstacles that are there and them overcoming the obstacles.
To understand the only difference between the possible and the impossible is your set of skills, a belief in yourself.
Getting better isn't a hack or a trick or a one change that you need to make.
That most of you say you want to be successful, but you don't want it bad. You just kind of want it. You don't want it badder than you want to party. You don't want it as much as you want to be cool. Most of you don't want success as much as you want to sleep.
We all have things that we're believing for, dreams that we want to accomplish, problems we're hoping will turn around. Maybe it's to see our family restored, to lose some weight, to break an addiction, to start our own business. But sometimes, as it goes on, month after month, even year after year, we don't see anything changing. It's easy to get discouraged and think, it's never going to happen. This is as good as it gets. I'll just learn to live with it. We all go through disappointments, setbacks, loss. Pain is a part of life. It's easy to get discouraged, even bitter. Think, why is this happening to me?
But my question is, why isn't everyone? To me, it comes down to the strategies that you use. There really isn't anything objectively good or bad. There isn't anything that happens to you that can't be overcome. There isn't anything that could happen to you. Anything.
You can't afford not to be you. You can't afford just to go to work so you can get a check. You cannot afford not to see what your greatest is. You can't afford not to put your foot all the way down and see what you can get out of life. You can't afford not to be you. You still in the game, which means if you're in the game and there's still time in the game, still time left in the game, you can still win the game.
Giving up your personal history. And I learned it from a man named Carlos Castaneda, who once said that one day, he said, I finally realized that I no longer needed a personal history. And just like drinking, he said, I gave it up. And that, and only that, has made all the difference in the world. You know the nice thing about giving up your personal history is that if you don't have a story, you don't have to live up to it. All of us have these bags of manure that we carry around with us called our past, and the people who have done things to us, and the events and the circumstances, all of this stuff that we use and we bond to. And we bond ourselves to these wounds of our past, and we identify ourselves on the basis of these wounds. And every once in a while we set it down and we reach in there and we smear it all over ourselves. And then we wonder, why does my life smell so bad? I don't understand this. When in fact, the now, this moment, merging yourself into the now, means that you may have been in a relationship. I had a woman from Holland who came over to see me, whose husband had left her after 25 years. She had 4 children, and she just had been on the verge of suicide. And she was losing weight, and she was depressed, and she was taking all kinds of drugs for it, and she was getting sicker and sicker because she just couldn't get over it. And she came to a book signing that I was doing at a bookstore down in Florida. And she said, you've got to say something to me. You've got to say something to me that will help me to get over this. And I told her this line. I said, give up your personal history. Merge yourself here, now, into this moment. And those 25 years are something, if you want to understand how to do it, think of your past as, oh, this hat. And this is your past. Now, you can't just set this thing down over here and walk away from it and give up your personal history, because you'll always have it there to look back at. What you do is you pick up your past and you embrace it. You understand it, you accept it as, I had to go through these things that I had to go through in order for me to get to this place today, and the evidence for that is that I did. You don't need any more evidence. You did. And then you toss it. You toss it. You embrace it, and you toss it. And you merge into the now by giving up your attachment. And some of you have heard me use the metaphor of the wake. Alan Watts talked about the wake is not what drives the boat. The wake is just a trail that is left behind. That's all it is. And so is the wake of your life. And the wake doesn't make the boat go, and neither does the wake of your life the reason why your life is going in the direction that it is. The wake is a trail that is left behind, and it's an illusion to believe that it is the cause of your suffering or your struggles or your difficulty. Give it up. Let it go. Embrace it, understand it, get help doing that if you must, and then move into the now.
We all feel like giving up something. We all go through times where we feel like God is 1,000,000 miles away, but we don't have any idea what He's doing. When we're tired, when we're weary, when we think we just can't go on.
Most people are afraid to set great dreams and set big goals because of the fear of failure. There's something much worse than failure. It is the fear of failure.
I want to remind you that failure is not final, it's formative. It is part of the process. It's part of the journey. Your failure matters as much as your success. How do you think you're going to grow if you don't ever fail? Yet some of you have failed and you have decided, well, guess what? I'm a failure. No, failure is an event. It is never a person.
I need you to make up in your mind that the only way you can lose is if you quit. I just need you to keep going.
First, you cannot give up. When you enter into your long season, you've got to give it all you've got. When people go into a season of struggle, the first thing that they want to do is take a sabbatical. But whenever trouble comes, the only way that you can get through trouble is work your way through it.
Make a declaration to yourself. Declare all-out war that you're going to get out of this rut. I suggest to you that if you are facing a challenge, don't stop. Stay busy. Work your plan.
Don't confuse movement with progress. In order to achieve your goals, you must apply discipline, which you have already done, and consistency every day. You have to work at it. Every day, you have to plan. Every day. You've heard the saying, we don't plan to fail, we fail to plan. Hard work works. Working really hard is what successful people do.
And I can tell you from my own personal experience, don't give up there.
Develop your own compass and trust it. Take risks, dare to fail. Remember, the first person through the wall always gets hurt. You're going to fall down, but the world doesn't care how many times you fall down as long as it's one fewer than the number of times you get back up.
If you want to grow up, you want to be mature, there is no way to do it without pain. You can't grow up on the easy street. And the very thing that discourages you is the very thing that develops you.
Make one room in your house as beautiful as possible. That's what I'm writing about now. I talked a lot already about the necessity of cleaning your room, which is, in some sense a foolish piece of advice because it seems so obvious, but it's not obvious at all. And you'll find if you try it, especially if you're in a household that's not very functional, that you'll encounter obstacles that you couldn't imagine existed while you're trying to put your life in order. And you can take your surroundings beyond order and move towards beauty, and that's unbelievably useful because, well, beauty calls people to their higher being, I would say, and to make friends with beauty is to introduce yourself very carefully to one of the mysteries of life that make it worth living.
Now, we teach things that are generally not taught in school, as I already have said, but I want to talk about another little factor. 90% of the visits to medical doctors are directly or indirectly related to stress. 90%. My stress level, and I face as many deadlines as anybody you know. It's always a book production, a class I'm teaching, a seminar I'm presenting, and each one of them requires time and concentration. Example, how many of you feel like I've made this talk before?
Can I see your hand, please? Several hundred times I made it yesterday. You know what I did between yesterday and today? I spent over 6 hours getting ready for today. You see, I think it would be arrogant if I thought I could stand up and spit it out just because I did it yesterday or hundreds of times. That's arrogance. When you respond to life instead of react to it, react is negative. You get sick, go to the doctor, she gives you a prescription, says, see me tomorrow. You walk in the next day, she said, uh-oh, it's not working. We're going to have to change their prescription. You get a little nervous. But if she smiled and said, hey, it's working. And so she's just responded, and you feel better because now you see some real hope in order to get ahead in life.
Make friends with people who want the best for you. And that's a meditation on my own childhood and adolescence to some degree. I had friends who wanted the best for me and friends who didn't. And, they were friends who, some of them were aiming up and some of them were aiming down. And if you have a friend that's aiming down and you do something that's aiming up, then they're generally not that happy about it. They try to top your accomplishment with one of their own, hypothetical or real, or put down what you're doing, or offer you a cigarette if you're trying to quit and you've kind of done that successfully, or a drink if you've been drinking too much and are trying to stop being an alcoholic, or they're cynical and bitter and devoted towards no good. And sometimes that's family members too, and sometimes it's even part of you, But this chapter is an injunction to people, is like you have an ethical responsibility to take care of yourself, you have an ethical responsibility to surround yourself with people who have the courage and faith and wisdom to wish you well when you've done something good, and to stop you when you're doing something destructive. And if your friends aren't like that, then they're not your friends. And maintaining your friendships with them might not even be in their interest. And so it's a tricky argument to make, because I'm not saying, whenever anyone's in trouble, you should, push them into a ditch and then give them a couple of kicks. That's not the idea. The idea is that, but I had a couple of rules I didn't write about. One was be careful about whom you share good news with, and another was be careful about whom you share bad news with. And those rules ring in people's minds quite quickly. A friend is someone you can share good news with, You go to them and you say, hey, look, this good thing happened to me. And they say, look, I'm so happy that happened to you. Like, way to be. And they don't think, God damn it, why didn't that happen to me? And you didn't deserve it. Here's a bunch of reasons you're stupid and why it won't work. It's like, that's not helpful. And so I would say, if people are, the other thing people are doing, if they're trying to drag you down, let's say, is they're trying to see if you'll put up with it. Because they have this idea that maybe life isn't worth living and things aren't good, and that if they can besmirch, let's say, to use an archaic term, something that's pristine and good, then they demonstrate to themselves that there is no true ideal and that there's no necessary reason to be responsible and to strive forward. And so they use you as a test case. I'll just push you down into the low lobster bin and see how you respond. And if you put up with it, then yeah, my cynicism is fully justified. If you take people and you expose them voluntarily to things that they are avoiding and are afraid of, that they know they need to overcome in order to meet their goals, their self-defined goals. If you can teach people to stand up in the face of the things they're afraid of, they get stronger. And you don't know what the upper limits to that are, because you might ask yourself, if for 10 years, if you didn't avoid doing what you knew you needed to do, by your own definitions, right, within the value structure that you've created, to the degree that you've done that, what would you be like?
Greatness is not this wonderful, esoteric, elusive, God-like feature that only the special among us will ever taste. It's something that truly exists
And all of us, it's very simple.
I told myself that this might be your current circumstances, but this will not be how the story ends. All you have to do, E.T., is to survive today.
My glory, it doesn't happen in front of a crowd. It doesn't happen in a stadium. It doesn't happen on a stage. There's no medals handed out. My glory happens in the darkness of the early morning, in solitude, alone, where I try. And I try, and I try again to be everything that I possibly can be. The best that I possibly can be. Better than I was yesterday.